Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast. I'm Dan Hilton, and today I have with me Ryan Holmes. How's it going today, Ryan?
Doing well, doing well. How about you?
I'm doing okay. My workday kind of starts with this interview with you, while your workday has kind of ended on the back end of it. But before we get to talking about you, because today it's a lot about Ryan Holmes, we've gone through and done a lot of these different interviews. So today we are chronicling one of the players who's been with the Empire since 2016. But before we do get to that, I have to talk about what wound up being one of the games of the season, and arguably one of the games of the entire AUD, not even the AUDL season this year, but maybe of all time regular season games against Atlanta, where the Empire do fall 22-21. Now it's been about a week. I think most people have let it kind of fester, and there's not too much to talk about that game about. There's plenty of highlights, sure, but what has the team gone through either last night at practice or some of the discussions now this week about getting back in the win column against Pittsburgh? And then what are the bigger impressions of the team after the Atlanta loss?
Well, I think the positive side of a 1 point loss is it's a real wake up call for the small things. It's easy to blame a lot of things, but really, I think the team has taken it as a huge motivation for effort at practice and focus at practice. I think we had our best practice this season yesterday. The energy was high, motivation was high. Players were taking defense seriously the entire time. I mean, being the thing that I pay the most attention to, I noticed that. And honestly, it was a rigorous practice. My legs are probably the most tired they've been on a Thursday, and I think that's a great sign. I mean, people are frustrated. There are things to think about. There are evaluations to make and changes to make. But the energy and the focus is where it needs to be, bouncing off of a 1 point loss. And I think that that's a great sign for the team.
Yeah, for sure. I think I speak for everybody. Again, I was biased on the broadcast, but I think that I and everyone else wants to see that game 2.0. I mean, I think that's what everyone is looking forward to. Just being on the call, trying to be as unbiased as I could be, just enjoying every play, every highlight. The stars came out, but in the same regard, that game could have been decided by the 20th man on that roster on that day. So certainly, and yeah, you face Pittsburgh this week. But now it's Ryan Holmes time. So 2:45 in, it's time to talk about Ryan Holmes. And I want to start all the way with the beginning. So some players pick it up in college, some pick it up in high school. But for you, Needham High School up in Massachusetts, you're a Massachusetts guy. Was it just track, or is that where the ultimate journey began?
Actually, I started playing Ultimate before I started running track. My best friend at the time from Needham, Tom Allen, he's a Philly player right now, and his older brother had been one of the initial players on this Needham High School frisbee team, and I hadn't really committed to a sport full time. I had played soccer, I had played basketball, certainly wasn't exceptional at those sports, and he was just like, "We should just go play frisbee." And I was like, "All right, let's do it." And I just started really early with the sport, and it's addictive. I mean, I think I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit, but it's addictive once you get started. There's a lot of technical to it. There's a lot of skill to it. The physicality is great. And yeah, I know, I just fell in love pretty early, to be honest.
Yeah, and then track obviously being something that could easily translate as you went on to UMass. So with UMass, you didn't play with Jeff Babbitt and Connor Klein, but you did play with Ben Katz. So how do you think, I mean, it's a tough thing to do graduating in 2013, but how do you think you helped shape the culture of Zoo Disc so that they could then, when they picked up Jeff Babbitt and Connor Klein, reach college nationals the year after you left in 2014, again, having you graduate in 2013?
Yeah, a loaded question for me affecting the culture of UMass. I think if you ask different people this question, they will answer different ways.
Well, Katz didn't to work with either, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the culture that we had when I was there, and that I definitely fostered for better or for worse, was just this concentration on energy and emotion as a source of ability and a source of, energy, basically, like on the field performance. Like the more pressure, the better you perform. The angrier you are, the better you play, the more focused you are. And it was really about utilizing emotion. And not gonna lie, that cost us in a few spots in college, and the team was very emotional. And I think one of the things that happened after the year I left was that all of the energy and emotion that the team had built up got to be a lot more focused as Tina took over as a coach, and as players like Jeff came in to show people on the field right away, like, oh, I can dominate with this emotion, and you can follow me and watch me. And I think that yeah, I think that the focusing of the energy and emotion that was fostered when I was there definitely affected their ability to make nationals. That being said, I would like to note that I'm a little salty that I came in fourth at regionals every single year that I played for Zudisk, and then they came in fourth, and that was good enough to make nationals. So I'm forever frustrated that the way that nationals bids were determined were so different in the later years. They were a better team, but still.
Yeah, we wound up actually graduating the same year. And so down at Hofstra, our region got one of your bids. And therefore, when we finished third in our region, we were able to get your regional bid. So I do
exactly.
Thank you for that. So
yeah,
that was the highlight of my career. And as we'll get through this podcast, you've had other highlights in your career as well. So I'm glad I got that. Hopefully, it was directly, but my team did take it from you. But at UMass, you were under Bill Stewart. What was it like learning from him, and what are some of the things that you still carry with you from the lessons he taught you?
Yeah, we had a few coaches over the years, but often Bill was the primary coach of Amherst College, and he would jump over to UMass if Amherst didn't make regionals. He would jump over to UMass because his son Robin was on Zudisk with me. And honestly, those months or the month or so, the weeks of practice, it feels like months now because we used to practice 5 times a week. That's a little bit more than Empire practices. But he would jump over and we would architect defenses that were just far more advanced than, what a bunch of college kids who had not been playing Frisbee for that long would think about. And yeah, the feedback I got on positioning and how the offense wants to move the disc and how to place yourself in spots where you can attack what the offense wants. I think that was irreplaceable for me. He really had a lot of great input, and it's important to have these sort of people with acumen to help, jump you, like standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of understanding where to place yourself and how to move. And he was huge for that.
It's funny you say that about standing on the shoulders of giants, because UMass, yes, Amherst is a hotbed. That's a conversation I've had partly with Jeff on this show, but we can talk about in length with other players as well. But as far as UMass, they had won the 1986 national championship. Have you ever heard stories of the 86 national championship team? And what is it like going to a college where, not to say that a national championship was the goal, of course, but it was something that that your school was capable of in the past?
Yeah, I don't want to misspeak, but I think Bill was on that team in 86. Is that right? Or is that past? I don't remember. But nationals was always the goal. And then winning, it was always so clear to us that winning was the goal. We just never wanted to lose. I don't know if I've played for a team that hated losing so purely as much as the UMass teams that I played for. Because like I said, we were a purely emotional team. And through the ups and downs, I don't know, the emotional impact that losses had on us and the drive it gave us to never have that happen again was close to unparalleled on any team I've played for.
Well, I think that makes sense. I think psychologically for UMass, you want to win everyone, even if you're not favored in it, or even if you're not at the highest level. But we're going to get into Ironside now. And I think, again, not to speak for you, but that comparison between Ironside and with the Empire, the players across the line from you are the top of the sport. They are the creme de la creme. And if you're going to lose, you're losing to the all-time best. And I think when you're in college, and I think it's the way it goes, where unless you're in that national championship game, or if you're at college nationals, if you're playing at regionals and you think you're the better team, of course, I think there's going to be a lot more sour disappointment in this idea that you weren't able to get over the hump, and that's on you, as opposed to, again, Ironside and Empire. We just saw it last week against the Hustle, where most of your team were talking with me after the game, and we're kind of talking about the fact that that's a great team. Full stop. Yeah. That's what it is. They have athletes. Atlanta's a great team. And when you lose to a great team, you guys are older now too, a little more mature than 18, 19 years old. So you take the L's a little better. But yeah, losing to the all-time greats of the sport is a little different than, again, losing in college regionals. I completely agree with that idea.
UMass also, speaking of cultures I helped develop, arguably for the worse, maybe objectively for the worse, UMass had an arrogance about it as a team. We never thought we were the underdogs. There were teams we went up against where every single person on the planet who wasn't on the field for UMass would have told you that UMass had no shot of winning this game, no chance. They were a significantly worse team. But if you asked any of us if we were going to win that, if we were a better team, not if we were going to win the game, if we were a better team, we'd be like, yeah, we're a better team. We're the best. We have all these people. We have like John Barker throwing the disc. I had Matt Babbitt Jeff's older brother, like playing on every under. I'm unbeatable in the air is a sentence I'm sure I said many times when I was a sophomore in college. So yeah, I mean, that arrogance, we didn't like losing when you're that sure that you're better. That losing is just going to motivate you to be like, all right, I'll prove it next time. Like, you'll see. Watch me.
Well, I think that confidence did help you because the summer of your sophomore season, you wind up making Boston's Ironside one of, not to say dynasties, of course, the national championships didn't rile up, but as far as making the semifinals and doing big things at nationals every year. So prior to the Empire, you featured, and this is not even prior to the Empire, but during your time at UMass, you featured with Boston's Ironside, even as you were in college. I said, first making the team in 2010, but it was the next year, your junior year, as Ironside went all the way to nationals, falling 15-10 to Revolver. How do you think that experience shaped you as a player?
Yeah, I think I came back to UMass a significantly different player than I did before. I will say it was a pretty big check to any arrogance I had coming out of UMass. Like, obviously, I felt like I was incredible at UMass and playing in college, and there were just a few players whose names I would remember in college, and I'd be like, okay, this person is like a person I have to maybe think about playing against. But then playing for Ironside, I mean, I just remember one of my first practices, Jeff Graham making like a small hip shimmy and roasting me to the front cone of an end zone, and me being like, well, apparently I'm bad at Frisbee. And like, the humbling nature of the experience and the amount that I gained in understanding, like, oh, you thought you were good, but on this team, they're taking you because your physicality is there and your speed is there. You need to learn that your brain is also wicked important. And you see that now in these players as the sport has evolved and better players have come out. Like, the way that Ben Katz gets blocks, he's not beating someone in a straight 10-yard sprint like I would have said is the only way to get blocks in 2010. He's just standing in the right place all the time. And I think that's what Boston was trying to drill into me a lot at practices and with the feedback I got from older players. And I definitely was a significantly better player my junior year than my sophomore year after playing for Boston Ironside.
Well, just going again, before we do junior, but going back to even your sophomore year, on that 2010 Ironside team was a man by the name of Nasser Mbe-Vogel.
Yeah, that's right.
Empire this season. So what's it like playing with somebody at a high level after an entire decade?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I feel a little old that I could play with somebody who I was at, the finals of nationals in club over a decade ago with.
But to give you some hope, because he's 10 plus years old.
That's right.
He's still doing it at a high level. If anything, your ultimate clock still has plenty of time. If you can train like Mbe-Vogel.
Nas is amazing. He's also a great teammate. If people haven't played with Nas, he has an incredible, supportive teammate, tons of energy. I always feel like he has your back, and I felt like that back in 2010, where I didn't necessarily feel like I felt a little estranged on the 2010 Ironside team, not because people weren't friendly, they were, and they were good teammates, but I did feel like the humbling experience almost set me apart. But Nas has always been a super supportive teammate, and I am thrilled to have him on Empire. And it is wild to play with someone again after 10 years. And we've played against each other in a couple other spots, like he played for Montreal. So I've like seen him in Frisbee, but it is wild to play with somebody you haven't played with in a decade. It's awesome. It's a great feeling.
Well, another footnote for the ultimate nerds is that not only was 2010 the year that you and Nasser joined Ironside, but also the year that Boston Glory's Josh Marquette joined the team.
That's right.
This is the first year that we'll get to see Boston Glory's Josh Marquette in the AUDL. So, but I digress. Was it weird seeing Ironside? And I don't mean to heap on you that Zoo Disc made nationals year after you left, but yes, Ironside win the national championship in 2016 with the Hustle's John Stubbs instead of older brother George, who you'd played with for years. Was that a little odd finally seeing Ironside get to the top of the mountain without some of those guys that you figured were going to be national champions?
Yeah, it's weird. You do put people up on a pedestal when you first see them. I mean, George was the first person I ever saw that I was truly like, okay, this person is much, much better than I am, and I have a lot to learn. And he was really the icon for me in terms of how good I wanted to be. Like, I'm going to contest his rule. That was my goal. I didn't, by the way. But him leaving the team and them winning with his younger brother. And after a few more roster turnover, To be honest, that team had always been kind of a system team. I mean, you can't come in second like 6 out of 7 years
Right.
unless you're a system team. And I think they're less affected by roster turnover than some other teams in club at that time, especially because it was it was a long time ago, right? 8 years ago, 7 years ago. But yeah, it's surprising, to be honest. I was surprised Judas made nationals the year after I left. Less so now that I've seen Jeff play more. But yeah, it's surprising. Not gonna lie. Also, though, super happy for those guys. So many of them deserve a gold. They tried so hard. That team put in so much effort all the time. Practices were absolutely crazy. There was so much competitiveness at practice and so much motivation to win. So I'm super happy that those guys won a gold. They deserve it. Really, really.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too that with Ironside, since obviously it dissolved and it exists in forms, but the name Ironside is no longer in the club ultimate scene. But that said, it is good to know that the name Ironside will always be associated with a championship. And it's one of those, well, again, we'll say ultimate dynasties that did deserve at least one. So I'm glad to see they got one. But you were busy yourself in 2016 because you were making your debut with the New York Empire. So I do have to ask, at that point, the Empire had been around for a few seasons. Again, you've been a Boston guy forever and ever and ever, but you come down to New York. What first brought you to the Empire?
So one of my former teammates at UMass, Kevin Norton, had just moved to New York in 2016, and he was like, you used to be good at frisbee. What the hell happened? Like, I haven't seen you on the scene. Like, you haven't been really playing at all. Why don't you just come play Empire? And I was like, oh, I'm kind of out of shape. I don't really know if frisbee's doing it for me. Also, I didn't finish my 2013 season with Boston Ironside the second year I played because going up for a disc, there's a highlight video of it. I won like play of the game or whatever, play of the day for some San Francisco tournament. And at the end of the clip, they say Holmes heating up or Holmes getting fired up. And that's me ripping my gloves off in frustration that my hamstring has tweaked for the umpteenth time in my career. So I'd really given frisbee a break, but Kevin sort of convinced me by calling me a coward about 30 times to show up to an Empire tryout. And I did. And I think, you forget what it feels like to have the motivation to get constantly better at something until you play it, until you're in it for like 2 hours with, good people and a reason to try hard. And I think as soon as I jumped onto that field, I was like, all right, fine. I have to rehab this hamstring. I have to get better, and I'm going to try and play for this team.
As far as trying hard, you've done a lot of trying hard on the D line for the majority of your Empire career. How do you think playing D in the league has evolved over the last 5 years?
It's definitely evolved significantly, but I still think we're in the infancy of understanding how to play defense on the field this wide and this big. I mean, the difference between Club Ultimate, that the 13 extra yards horizontally is really insurmountable when it comes to positioning and man defense. And obviously, club is just like heavily dependent on man. It's such a massive part of club defense. But teams like Atlanta have shown you can do so much with zone, and it changes the game so significantly. Zones are just constantly evolving. I love to see practices where Jeff comes up with some nonsensical thing that seems totally crazy and is like, we're going to try this. Like, it's worth trying. And that's true. These things are worth trying. And the crazier these defenses get, you've seen a lot of evolutions, like roller pulls, these dropped pulls. We tried a Bach pull one time at the final or semifinals of the championships in the ADL in 2018, which worked but wasn't great. I think defense has come a long way and is going to continue to evolve with these quirky strategies that end up boiling down into solid, serious strategies that are extremely effective when thrown correctly.
Yeah, no disrespect to the athletes themselves who have paved the way throughout time in the AUDL so far, but as the athletes continue to improve, you do see that the game is getting more and more athletic as well. And AUDL is suited to the athlete. And so those zone schemes, for the Empire, not to give away some of your secrets, but yes, funneling the disc into the middle of the field to Marquez Brownlee or Jeff Babbitt defensively isn't a bad strategy, as we've seen many.
Yeah, that's right.
So speaking of Marquez, actually, as far as he is the primary puller on the Empire, of course, on that D1 line, but almost 300 pulls for you in your Empire career. So for just doing the math there, that's a lot of points you've already played. You played over close to 300 points already, plus, and you haven't pulled in every one of those. You played offense as well. So I do ask, what is the art of a good pull? And my other guess, maybe other than what you and Marquez might have learned from each other, but also a former Ironside teammate, former Boston Whitecap of the MLU, and former Montreal Royals for a few games there, was Christian Foster. So maybe he taught you a thing or two as well. But what is the art of a good pull?
Honestly, if I had known that I was going to be a puller, I would have picked Christian's brain a lot more. I mean, Sifo is a unbelievably good puller, especially in a time where there really weren't. People weren't really thinking about the pull as an aspect of the game. A decent explanation of why I didn't ask him more about it at the time. But he really did revolutionize the importance of the pull. And that was in club, let alone this super wide field where putting the disc on the sideline is so much more important to start off a point. And yeah, me and Marquez do talk a lot. I often come to him on the sideline and be like, how does the wind feel? Since he's on the primary puller, he's going to be pulling before me very often. And like, how does the wind feel? Like, is this still an OI pull today? Cause we're both backhand pullers. Like, is this an OI wind today? Am I shifting to IO just because I need to cut through the wind a little bit more severely? Yeah, I mean, I think the art of a good pull, to be honest, is less muscling through everything and realizing that it's sort of like golf in this way. You can put a lot of muscle in it, but in the end, the way you release the Frisbee and the amount of spin you have on it and the level of the Frisbee as you release is way more important for cutting through wind and getting deeper than any amount of strength you have. And I think the art of a pull is reps. Throw a lot of pulls if you want to pull. It's a thing that people don't practice that much. But if you could get to a field and throw, 30 pulls every other day, you're going to be one of the better pullers pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things, I don't know if you say that gloves help you pulling, but you are a regular wearer of gloves for quite a few years now. And I'd say before they were cool, Ryan Holmes is wearing gloves. But for the younger players, what are the pros and cons of wearing gloves?
I mean, the pro is consistency, right? The gloves will grab the disc all the time. Your catching will improve, objectively speaking. And your throws are more consistent in the rain for sure. There are people who think that they're a little too grippy when it's not raining. I think that's true, but as you practice with them, the consistency of how much they grip the Frisbee gets very regular. I mean, I'm not the best thrower, so I don't know if I can speak, but there are great throwers who have gloves. And I think it's mostly about what you're used to. And I would take consistency over some slight edge where you have more finite finger control of the Frisbee. Like, that's outside of my, cares right now.
Is it crazy to just wear a glove on the non-dominant
Yeah,
hand?
that seems totally insane to me. Like, you can maybe catch with one hand better, but the difference between how you catch the Frisbee, like, you're going to only catch with your left hand, but your right hand will be slipperier when you're shifting the disc. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are people who operate well with it, but that seems crazy to me. I think you're just being a little wild if you do that, to be honest.
All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit to, I mean, yes, you play for the Empire and you do a lot of work on the field, but when you look at that roster, you've done a lot of work behind the scenes as well. I keep the whispers throughout your teammates are that they call you a master recruiter, that you played a hand with Kevin Norton, who actually brought you to the Empire in the first place. The two of you are kind of credited with getting Jeff Babbitt to New York just as he was graduating from UMass. And later on, Ryan Osgard, the most recent one, where you also were said to have a hand in that recruitment. So do you consider yourself a master recruiter, or how have you helped out with ownership and Matt Cat Stevens in finding talent? And I think it's pretty easy to evaluate the talent that is Babbitt and Oscar. I'm not saying you don't know who to find the right players to, but just getting that extra word in.
Yeah, I feel I'm more of a supplementary recruiter. I'm not necessarily finding the people. The idea is to secure them once you've, allowed them to understand that Empire is an option. And that's really what happened with Jeff and with Ryan is, they're interested in the team. Let's show them that, we're a good team. You can play Frisbee with us. And obviously you can join this offense that's totally unbelievable to play on with these incredible players, or, play with Jeff Babbitt so that you can watch this dude get a ton of blocks and play your defense around that sort of power. But, jumping on about 15 League of Legends games a week with Ryan Osgard to make sure he knows that, you know, we're super fun without even having to play a single game of Frisbee with us. Or, you know, Jeff and I, we played a million years ago on a club team called Star Fox, which was just a bunch of UMass kids. And Matt invited his younger brother, Matt Babbitt invited his younger brother, Jeff, at the time to play with us when he was like 16 or 17. I don't even remember how old he was. Like him being like, him talking to, I'm sure he talked to Matt, and like we knew each other pretty well, and just, you know, securing that like there are people that you know on this team that are a good time and fun to hang out with outside of Frisbee is a huge part of why you'd want to play for the Empire. And I think that that's a big part of the team on the Empire.
Yeah, a lot of times you do look through a lot of these teams, and it's different everywhere. But there are tryouts, and you see that there are gems that are uncovered through tryouts, and then there are other players where Jeff Babbitt. Not to say that Jeff tries out every year, but also Jeff Babbitt was known well because of his whether it was college nationals with UMass or just being known for some of his other ultimate accolades, being the defensive player of the year, of course, in college. So you did mention League of Legends, and I want to talk about that too, because as far as board game savants on the team, you're high on everybody's ledger, it seems like. So do you favor the co-op games? Do you prefer the head-to-head games? Do you prefer the ones where it takes 45 minutes just to learn the rules and get into it 2 hours? Or what's your preference?
I mean, co-op is fun. I generally like to play against other people as opposed to like a computer or a AI or, you know, a set board enemy. Yeah. But co-op is fun. We played Spirit Island. Jeff, myself, and Ben Katz played that for a couple times, and that would be fun. I think we'll probably play it some more as we, you know, have some more free time. But yeah, I think against other people is generally the way I'd like to go. We bought this game in Atlanta called Root, which did take us an hour and a half to learn the rules to, and I think we still cheated a couple times. So the second time will have to be a little more locked down.
Yeah, but I gotta be honest, I was in and out of that one in about 3 minutes. I walked over, tried to take it in, and said, "No, thanks."
There are a lot of rules to that game. But yeah, I think learning the rules and adapting to a new set of constraints is sort of my favorite part about board games. And when it comes to video games and stuff like that, the enviable part of it for me, or the attractive part of it for me, is, you know, here's a set of dynamic rules. Adapt to them the best you can, and try to perform the best you can. And that's what I like to do. I think that's the most fun, the most challenging part. And when it's against other people, it is really a competition of who can adapt faster to not only my own understanding of the constraints and how to operate my best, but also how are they doing and how can I exploit any mistakes they're making in how they're adapting to the rules. And
yeah, I also find talking to your teammates that, again, many of your teammates I've spoken to either like video games or like board games. And I mean, as most people, I think are age bracket too. But for many of them, I think there's this knock on playing games with too much chance. So how much chance are you comfortable with, or rather how much skill and wit do you want in a game?
As long as the better player or the person who makes the better decisions wins a good percentage of the time.
Yeah,
I play a lot of card games. So like I play poker. I used to play the Magic the Gathering card game, the deck builder games, Hearthstone. I played that for a while. They have luck, like a lot of it. And there's a ton of probability and random chance in those games. But in general, as you scope over a large sample size, people who make better decisions, like in poker, for example, the better player will just be a winning player. You will make money playing poker if you are better than the people you're playing against over a decently large sample size. And you see it all the time. That being said, I always say that my favorite game of all time was StarCraft. And there's no luck in that game. There's a little luck, but it's almost none. And it's not quite chess in terms of zero luck, but it is close to zero luck. And that's my favorite game because the better player wins 90% of the time in a best of five, or not necessarily the better player overall, but the person who played the right strategies and did the right things in a 5-game set will win the 5-game set, a massive majority.
Yeah, I feel like I get my brain in a noodle sometimes. My friends and I, the game of choice with my friends and I is Settlers of Catan, and Japan rather. And I feel like we have one friend that seems to win maybe 6 or 7 out of every 10 games, but I feel like that game should be more chance. But I also him credit for winning as much as he does. And yet in the same regard, there I'm in noodles and going, yeah, I think this is chance, or is he just that much better than the rest of us? I mean, I think maybe he is, but yeah, I want to mention, to go back about the things that you do off the field and connecting with teammates on your shared occupations of software engineer, or even the data scientist, because a lot of your teammates wind up falling under that umbrella.
Yeah. I mean, Lithio is a programmer. I know Elliot has a PhD in master's, right, from Stanford in computer science. Yeah, and Ryan Osgar is a programmer as well. I mean, there's a lot of people in the computer science field or adjacent to it on
I
the
almost don't
team.
want to forget anybody. Sam Feder, and as well as Ryan Weaver, as well as Jose Aloro. They all work on
Postway as well.
software engineering. Yep.
Yeah, there's a million
Busy
of us.
people. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I grabbing a few that I've recently spoken to about it. But yeah, I think it's really cool. I guess there's some sort of correlation at that point. You got to start assuming that there's something pushing us to all have taken the same career. But it is interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's your job to figure that out, not me. I don't actually look at those charts.
Yeah, that's right. I'll stick to studying math and the numbers directly in finance. I'm not worried too much about that. That's too subjective for me. I'll stick to the hard numbers. But yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting, the amount of overlap, and it's cool to be able to talk to other people about it, especially about like quirks in the industry and like frustrating coworkers and stuff like that, because you do see a lot of that in this industry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before it was ever professional, before you getting paid to do it, my final question for you is, I want you to explain to the audience the Amherst Black Box, and please explain how ahead of the curve you were with that idea.
Oh, that was a senior design project back at UMass where, yeah, that was like a body cam before police body cams were like a thing, but it was about being able to confirm that a device hadn't been tampered with when it was recording something. So you couldn't edit the recording of this device. It would take a cryptographic signature of the video while it was being recorded. So you could always compare any video that was produced as, oh, this was the footage from this camera. And you could always compare it to this cryptographic signature from the camera itself, which would be uploaded remotely. And you could say, okay, this was tampered with. Like the cryptographic signature of this video that you're just showing me doesn't match the camera's uploaded signature. So this has been edited. But if it did match, that would mean that the original video that was recorded was untampered with and direct from the source. So it's kind of an interesting concept for the time. And it was in response to the Trayvon Martin shooting in Florida at the time, and it was sort of an idea that I guess has become even more serious nowadays.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a long time ago. Actually, I completely forgot about that project. I think I still have the box itself. Actually, that the PCB board that we printed it on. That was a great learning experience, to be honest.
Well, Ryan, I mean, there's ways that I found it. I mean, everyone knows my secrets at this point. But that said, yes, there is the CEO of Hootsuite is also named Ryan Holmes, and he also likes to exercise and play ultimate frisbee. So yeah, you're a little more difficult than some of the one-of-one Elliot Chartox of the world.
Yeah.
I do appreciate your time, Ryan. I think we really got to know you, and all of the Empire fans know they have had for the now 5 going on plus years a really good player, a puller, a D-line, whatever you need you to do. So thank you for your time, Ryan.
Thanks, Dan.
And thanks to the listeners as well. This wraps up another edition of the New York Empire podcast. For the entire New York Empire family, we'll talk to you soon.